as people are coming in, I want to thank you for coming on this wintry day. I hope everyone is snug and warm at home or wherever you are today. I'm Ed Aguilar. I'm the Pennsylvania Director for the Coalition for Peace Action, which is an organization that has worked for over 40 years for peace, nuclear disarmament, gun safety, voting integrity, that is voting rights, and of course, in recent years, the climate emergency. I want to thank Mark for using that term because it really is an emergency. So while we're settling in, let me also thank all the co-sponsoring organizations, and thank you for not just co-sponsoring, but for sharing this information about today with your friends and colleagues. I see a lot of people have joined us. We have Burke's Gas Truth, which works against fracking in Pennsylvania, and Karen Faradin is the founder, and she's going to be on our after panel, which will be very helpful. We have Brandywine Peace Community. I see Bob Smith here, and probably several others from Brandywine. We have Delaware Riverkeeper, and that is, of course, the lead organization in this campaign to stop the LNG terminal. We have the Coalition for Peace Action in both Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And our executive director will be joining us soon. And we have
I'm already here, Ed. I'm already here.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Welcome, Reverend Bob Moore is our executive director. We have the UN Association of Greater Philadelphia. And I think I see a couple of people already from the UN Association, which is a very great group on these issues. And we have the Resolution Media Fund, and WILP, Philadelphia WILP is the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, which is probably one of the oldest peace organizations in the world. And so we thank WILP Philadelphia for joining us. I hope I haven't left anyone out. If I've left out your organization, please put it on the chat and we will add that in. So we really have what I think is going to be a very educational but also interesting set of presentations today. We're going to begin with, and of course our theme is Stop the New Fortress LNG Terminal in Gibbstown, New Jersey, and Save the Delaware Watershed. And so our first speaker is Tracy Carluccio. Tracy is Deputy Director of the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, which has fought for many years to protect, preserve, and defend the Delaware River and its watershed from pollution and degradation. So she'll tell us about this deadly project to export super cold liquid natural gas to other countries and what the Delaware Riverkeeper is doing about it and what we can all do to help. So Tracy, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Ed. And thank you to everybody for joining today. We're going to have some slides. Nikki, have you put them up yet? And we'll just go through these slides and discuss at the end if there's any questions. So first, I'd like to just take us to this map, which shows the site where they want to build the Gibbstown terminal And on the left is Pennsylvania there, and on the right is New Jersey, and the Delaware River is that thin blue line that unites the two states. The site is that red dot, and it's just south of Philadelphia and Camden in Greenwich Township, Gloucester County, New Jersey. And it's at the old DuPont munitions manufacturing site, over 100 years old, where New Fortress Energy and its subsidiary, Delaware River Partners, want to build an LNG export terminal. It's at an existing deep water port that's called Gibbstown Logistics Center. Next slide. And here's a little closer look at the terminal site. Tinicum Township, Pennsylvania, right across the river there, and Chester, just a little bit downstream, about 2.5 miles. That's the closest densely urban community that is already disproportionately exposed to extremely damaging public health and environmental hazards. It's an environmental justice community, one of the first to officially be recognized, and actually is credited with developing that whole concept of environmental justice. But at the red X there is the terminal, which would require 45 acres of very destructive dredging of the river. The dock that they want to build there, called Dock 2, would potentially triple the activity at the facility. It would add 2 more shipping berths to the one that's already there at a smaller dock, which means that you'd have 3 ships, enormous ships, that require transloading constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They would take the product that would come in, the liquefied natural gas, off of rail cars and or tank trucks, and load it directly into waiting ships. And all of this would occur on property that backs right up to the backyards of the people of Gibbstown. And they are within the highest hazard zone should there be any accident. And the communities around there, however, have no protection from it. There's not been adequate safety analysis done of this project, amongst the other environmental issues. But that high hazard zone, we're going to talk about a little bit when we look at the maps. But the air pollution that would occur there and the public safety threats from this perpetual industrial activity is tremendous for this entire region of the river, and particularly for those that are closest to it. Next slide, please. So it's important, if we're going to take a good look at this, to understand the breadth of the proposal. And it really has what you would call an enormous, complicated path of destruction. This would be the first large-scale export project that would process natural gas, shale gas, on land up into the shale fields of Pennsylvania, and move this much liquefied natural gas over through highways, through rail, for so many miles ceaselessly. And this would also be the first liquefied natural gas export terminal on the Delaware River, and the first in New Jersey. There's been attempts in the past, and they've never been able to build them. Next slide. Just want to say quickly that this project, like other liquefied natural gas projects, induces fracking. And we know how ruinous fracking has been to the communities where it's occurring in Pennsylvania and across the nation. And the gas would have nowhere else to go unless they made this new market niche they're trying to make, because actually nobody needs the gas. So they're creating this niche by developing liquefaction plants out in the shale fields, and then exposing these communities, bringing it downstream to the Gibbstown facility. And that fracking would not occur without this new market that they're trying to push on us. Next slide. And this also requires a liquefaction plant in Wyalusing that I mentioned. It's in Bradford County, Pennsylvania. This is the site. It's actually not active right now. It's shut down right now, but you can see it's a scorched earth policy along the beautiful Susquehanna River. And it would also have very polluting emissions for the liquefaction of the gas there. You have to build a pipeline to get it there. As you can see, they've already destroyed the entire riverbank for more than a mile. And it would be, again, round the clock activity of about 300 to 400 trucks every single day leaving the facility. Next slide, please. So also, I just want to mention here, and we'll go into it a little bit more, that there's a couple of different ways that they want to do this day and night transport of liquefied natural gas. One is tank trucks, you see at the top of the slide there, and the other is rail cars. Now, there are over 1 million people, about 1.3 million people, that are going to be exposed to the danger of this liquefied natural gas should it be carried all the way about 200 miles down to Gibbstown from Wyalusing. But they don't know about it. As a matter of fact, these communities that it's going to go through don't have any control over it. And we have, over the last year, had a tremendous resolution campaign with people going out into their towns and trying to spread the word about what's going on. But still, very few people know about this and know that this dangerous, flammable, and potentially explosive product would be coming day and night through their communities, basically forever. And also, I want to mention, and I'll show quickly here what the routes are, but the special permit that was given to New Fortress Energy's subsidiary, Energy Transport Solutions, would use rail cars that have never been used for liquefied natural gas before. It's a total guinea pig type of operation where everybody in its path is going to be the community that finds out what would happen should there be a rail car that derails and the product is released into the atmosphere. We're going to talk a little bit about those impacts that come from liquefied natural gas when it does get released into the environment, but it's important to understand that New Fortress Energy went and got a special permit from the Trump administration in order to be able to transport this gas in unsafe rail cars that have never been tested for using it before. And that's another link in this very complicated project. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to show a couple slides here pretty quickly, and that's to show you that we don't really know what the routes are that they would take from Wyalusing down to Gibbstown, but we do know it's between 170 and 200 miles, depending on what route they take. If they take rail routes, there's two possible routes. One of them, they both go down, obviously, to Philadelphia. One loops up a little more and goes closer, actually, to New Jersey and the Trenton region. If they use the line that goes through Bristol, actually where the Delaware Riverkeeper Network office is, and then travels along the Pennsylvania side of the river down to Gibbstown. Or they could use what is a more direct route, and probably the most likely one to bring the material in these 100 car unit trains, they call them. They want to use about 2 of these a day across the Delaware Bridge. Both of them would have to cross the Delaware Bridge, no matter which route, and move south along the South Jersey line through all of the communities there, Camden and all south through to Gibbstown. And these routes, however, we have researched extensively by talking to hazardous material specialists and unions and the transportation authorities in order to figure it out. And this looks like the most likely routes. Also, there's 2 truck routes, and I just want to point out, and I'll show it a little closer. These truck routes are also the most likely ones they would use, but because of Homeland Security, they do not, they keep this information secret. We tried to get it when we were fighting oil trains, but it's even harder with the trucks. They don't give this information out, and it could change. However, this looks like the most likely route, and Pennsylvania is, as you can see there, turned into an entire sacrifice zone. That whole route, which is a very busy highway route, goes right down and then through the Philadelphia region, Delaware County, and crosses into the river. Next slide, across the river. Next slide, please. I just want to show you that we have on Delaware Riverkeeper Network's website an interactive map, and Nikki's going to be putting into the chat links to this and to other information, but this map shows you where the LNG rail transport would go through Philadelphia. And those dots there, they are schools and daycare centers. So you can see what is clustered around this transportation route. And also, those communities that live along that transportation route in Philadelphia are predominantly, the greatest density are populations of Black and brown people and low income communities. So this transportation, just like it's going to expose Chester, which is an environmental justice community, Paulsboro in New Jersey, which is only 3 miles away, an environmental justice community, it is going to expose by the train route the most vulnerable communities in Philadelphia, Black and brown people and low income. And as a result, we'll talk about this, there's a vibrant movement against this transport. Next slide, please. So this is just quickly to show you that also the LNG truck route goes right through the Delaware County region. It goes close over to Philadelphia itself, and then it travels across the Commodore Barry Bridge after it goes through Chester. And these routes, there's a bubble around them on either side, and what they're showing is a 2-mile high hazard zone. It doesn't mean it's safe outside of that zone, but what it means is that if you live within that 2-mile high hazard zone, you're going to get the most intense impact should there be an accident, and you're also going to get them quickest. So that's why we have this map, and please feel free to go and look at it. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the hazards of liquefied natural gas. It's a cryogenic, flammable gas. It's potentially explosive, and it is super cooled down to minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit. It's dangerous to handle, it's dangerous to store, and as a result of that, it has really unique safety hazards, mostly due to how much it is compressed. So if LNG is released to the atmosphere from its container, such as in a derailment or a truck accident, it boils furiously into a flammable vapor cloud that is extremely cold. Remember that minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit. It can asphyxiate anyone nearby by robbing all of the oxygen out of the air. That's how cold it is. And also, it can cause freeze burns and even death for those anywhere within the proximity. If the cloud reaches an ignition source, it will catch fire and burn so hot, the fire cannot be extinguished. The US Emergency Management Guidebook for transportation for firefighters say to evacuate at least 1 mile and just let the fire burn out. Now think about that in a populated area. Now, if the cloud does not reach an ignition source, a fire can still occur. And that's because it has unique properties when it expands as it leaves the container by 600 times. So this expanding vapor cloud can actually trigger an explosion, even if it doesn't reach a fire. But the fire that does, an ignition source, but the fire that does occur could be fatal for people within 10 seconds. And it can also travel 2 miles out and still cause severe burns. If it travels on water, it can go as far as 10 miles away. They don't even know how far it can travel because they haven't tested it at the federal level. But we do know that it can be deadly and catastrophic. You know, there's different analyses or comparisons that are made, and it can be so catastrophically powerful that it has, they say, the force of a Hiroshima bomb if 22 of these rail cars could explode. And remember, these unit trains carry 100 rail cars. So our concern here is illustrated by these slides. Even the trucks can have tremendous power, obviously, because it expands 600 times. And also liquefied petroleum gases would be handled also at this facility. And they are also explosive, although not nearly as catastrophically as LNG. Next slide, please. But that's why they call them bomb trains. That's why they call them bomb trucks. And that's why Delaware has banned liquefied natural gas terminals in their coastal zone where these ships would be going by. This is the type of ship they'd be using. They call them floating bombs. One ship has the force of 69 Hiroshima bombs should the entire ship go up. And this would be traveling within a mile or two of the shore along Delaware, and then also would expose southern New Jersey communities. And where these ships go, overseas. We all know that liquefied natural gas being exported is not being exported here to the United States. It's being sent over to other locations. Now, New Fortress Energy is trying to own every little piece of this scheme. So they're pushing liquefied natural gas import facilities in Ireland, in Puerto Rico, in Jamaica, in other Caribbean countries and other nations like Angola. And however, one of the problems that New Fortress is running into is that the world is changing. And that change is people fighting the import of liquefied natural gas. And in Ireland, they're working for a complete ban on liquefied natural gas imports. And they have actually put a tremendous roadblock in the way of New Fortress Energy at the terminal they were getting ready to build there. And they had to go back to square one. It looks like it might forever be defeated. But also in Puerto Rico, there's a movement, a popular movement with a lot of strength to work for renewable energy. And they say, we have sun, we have wind. We don't need to have liquefied natural gas that cost about 4 times as much as what we could generate here forced on us. We want to be self-determinating. And that's part of the reason that the community in Philadelphia is engaged in this fight. They don't want these trains going through the Puerto Rican community there, but they also don't want Puerto Rico to become further dependent on fossil fuels at this moment in time when the trend is to renewables and truly clean energy. Next slide, please. So the one thing I'm not going to go into this too much, but we maybe with Q&A, I want to point out, it's a little bit complicated, but there is also a rulemaking by the Trump administration to allow transporting liquefied natural gas by rail across the nation by any carrier. And it has been adopted. And right now today, the ban on moving LNG by rail, which was in place for many, many years because of the public safety issues, has been removed by the Trump administration. And that rulemaking, which allows this, has a certain conditions that have been put on it that probably mean it will be a while before they could actually move these trains, but they did require a stronger outer steel jacket that the trains that would be used by New Fortress Energy to bring the gas, liquefied natural gas, to Gibbstown do not have to have. So not only are we being turned into a sacrifice zone, we're not even going to have the minimal condition for public safety that was put on the federal rulemaking if this project were to go through and the transportation were to occur. And the next thing, slide I want to show that, and Nikki's going to be going into this, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but we all know that natural gas is primarily methane, and it leaks and is vented from the process that produces it and delivers it, transports it and uses it at every step of this deadly supply chain. And it is the most powerful of greenhouse gases in terms of hitting the atmosphere on a 20-year time scale. And that's the period when scientists insist we must be dramatically reducing these emissions in order to address the climate crisis. So I think, Nikki will explain this more, but there are many people, and including those in Ireland, for instance, many communities who are fighting the Gibbstown LNG facility, who are opposed to it because of the impact to climate. That is totally unacceptable when we should be using the dinosaur of fossil fuels and in the ground, leave it in the ground, and developing instead the replacement for truly clean and truly renewable energy sources. Next slide. There's a lot of things that you can do. And one of the things is we're joining with others who are fighting liquefied natural gas export projects across the US. And we've put together, after coordinating with folks and getting a lot of edits over the last month, a sign-on letter. And Nikki's going to be putting that into the chat. It's for organizations who would like to sign on to a letter to President Biden to say, we do not want liquefied natural gas exports, period. We want them stopped. And there's a lot of good scientific and technical information and a lot of compelling data in the letter. So if your organization wants to sign on, please respond, and the link is in the chat, and you can do that on the Google form. A companion to that is our petition. And this is the one that Karen has put out on Move On. And this one, there will be another one on Action Network, and individual organizations will be putting on their own platforms their version of this, which all has the same theme, that we want President Biden to stop liquefied natural gas exports. So that's one really important thing that you can do. And we believe with the Biden administration, we have a chance to actually turn around the backwards look that the Trump administration has carried forward with deregulation and with pushing fracking. We can turn that around. And because of President Biden's and his new administration's pledge to decarbonize not only our energy sources, but our economy. The next thing I want to mention is that we have a tremendous watershed community here in the Delaware River watershed. We are so lucky that people are engaged in the environmental issues that make the difference about whether or not we have a clean and healthy environment, healthy habitats, and diversity that grows and is supported by our river. And as a result of that, we have been fighting fracking in the Delaware River watershed for over 10 years. And one of the things that has just occurred since we've been planning this forum is after several years of draft regulations that have been put out by the Delaware River Basin Commission, there is now going to be a vote on whether or not they are going to adopt a full ban on fracking, throughout the Delaware River watershed, a ban on not only fracking, but frack wastewater. Right now, the rules would allow that wastewater to be brought in from outside of the watershed and treated at discharge here, which is totally unacceptable. Why would we allow the pollution from fracking if we're going to ban fracking? And also prohibit the export of water from the Delaware River watershed, because as we all know, fracking is extremely consumptive and is draining our fresh waters, and of course, totally destroying them through the pollution that occurs, including radioactive materials after you use water to frack with it. So there is going to be a vote this Thursday. It was called 3 days ago by the Delaware River Basin Commission. And this is now the moment we've been fighting for 11 years since the de facto moratorium was put in place in 2010. And this meeting, of course, unfortunately, because of COVID, we can't all be there and rallying. Instead, we have to join through Zoom. And there is all the information about how to do that. And if you don't have the ability to do that day by computer, you can call in, you can even watch it on YouTube, but there's not going to be any public comment. It's really for us to go and witness and let them know if they're going to be voting on fracking in the Delaware River watershed, which we've been fighting for and pushing, particularly in the last 3 years since they put the draft regs out that were unacceptable. And if they are going to be voting on whether or not they're going to have a full ban or not, everybody is going to be watching them in this watershed. So we very much look forward to you going to our Facebook event. We're going to have some social media coming up to further discuss this. But I think, most important to know that the liquefied natural gas facility is one that people have risen up against in our watershed. We have tremendous opposition and excitement.
After I listen to this,
Okay.
This meeting is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Let me just get back on, I'm sorry. Well, thank you, Tracy. That was very enlightening. And we have, so much content there. There are a couple of questions already. We're asking people to please hold more questions until the other speakers. But there is one question I think we could start with now. Larry asks, has it been proven that LNG products even yield more energy than it takes to produce it? Do we know that, Tracy?
Oh, you're asking, I didn't think we were going to take questions right now. Okay. So the question
Well,
is, does it
wait,
yield
you
more?
wanna think of-
I think the point is, it takes a lot of energy. Yes, it uses a tremendous amount of energy. Whether or not, there has been an analysis done that shows that is not. I'm sorry, I don't really think that's the point. I think the point is fossil fuels are dinosaurs. They need to be left in the past. We have renewable energy, and technically, it's available. It's there. It's viable, and it's really our future.
And I would totally agree. So our next speaker is Nikki Van Aller. She is the Assistant Director of the Coalition for Peace Action and has been for the past 3 years. And as someone who's worked with her, I have to say she's done a spectacular job. And she's also the co-chair of our No Wars, No Warming campaign. So Nikki, please take it away.
Thanks, Ed. Let me just get my slides up. Okay. So I know that a lot of you are here for the local issues, and we will get back to that specifically with, the next talk from Mark. But just for a few minutes, I want to take things to the federal level and to the climate crisis at scale. So for a little bit of context, you might be asking the question, what is a peace group, the Coalition for Peace Action? What are we doing talking about climate change? Why is an organization, with a mission of nuclear weapons abolition and promoting diplomacy instead of war, why are we talking about the right to a clean environment? It's our belief that when we talk about the planet and how we take care of it, that conversation needs to include the impacts of our hyper-militarism. As people who live, well, I'm assuming that we all live in the US, you never know with Zoom, we're people who live with, the quote unquote protection of the greatest military force there has ever been. We have to hold that force to account. That force, the infrastructure it takes to uphold, the energy it consumes, the actions it takes, the geographic area it covers, all of that impacts both people and planet. So the Coalition for Peace Action has this framework of no wars, no warming, where we attempt to connect the conversation among peace activists to the conversation among environmental activists. Because, not only are we stronger together, but we really need each other. It most often seems that we're in our own bubbles. So this is a collaboration that we need to engage in continually and not drop the ball on after 1 or 2 events. I'm not going to go into every connection that can directly be made between military excess and environmental damage. I'm just going to focus in on one area, but I do encourage folks to get informed about these connections because there are many more than what I'm going to speak on. That being said, this is a big one. It's a $700 billion conversation, right? So as I mentioned before, the US military force is hard to even wrap our minds around with its scale, and only expanding with the Space Force, right? So what goes along with that, what naturally goes along with that is that the US military is one of the world's largest greenhouse gas emitters. We emit more from our military than some entire countries do, Sweden, Portugal. If the Department of Defense were a country, it would rank as the 55th worst polluter in the world. If you add up all the CO2 emissions from US production of iron and steel, that's less than what the military contributes. And there's more information. These 2 papers at costofwar.org are extremely informative and very detailed if you want further reading. So just like with the Green Amendment efforts that Mark is going to talk about, and the opposition to the Gibbstown project that Tracy guided us through, I feel like it comes down to a question of our priorities. Is it more important to grow the natural gas industry, or is it more important to have clean and safe water for everyone? Is it more important to have thousands of fuel-guzzling fighter jets, or is it more important to have hundreds of thousands of jobs in renewable energy? There is, as Tracy has said, and I'm sure we'll come back to, there is a lot of promise and opportunity with a new president. That's just, that's the facts. But unfortunately, we're moving too slowly. We are back in the Paris Climate Accords, but most experts say that's not enough. Even if the countries involved were meeting their agreed upon goals, which most of them unfortunately are not, including the US. This graphic here is helpful and motivating. It really demonstrates the gravity here and the urgency. And you can see here that the, I'll try to point to it. The goal is keeping below that 1.5 degree warming. And current policies, there in the dark blue, would lead to a 2.9 degree increase, which would be disastrous. So that's the track we're headed on. The pledges and targets that have been agreed to would lead to a 2.6 degree increase. And then the most optimistic targets based on that still put us past 2 degrees. So I hope that with the Pentagon budget, I've presented one option for moving closer to that ultimate goal, staying under that 1.5 degree level. But Biden has been largely silent on the question of what he may propose for his Pentagon budget. He has a lot of ambitions, a lot of plans. I'm sure many of us support most of them. But those goals do cost money. And if he wants to accomplish all that he says he wants to do, there needs to be a significant shift in how our money, where our money goes, relates to our priorities, including, speeding us up to meeting these climate targets that we need to meet, and putting people and planet first. At the federal level, that has to be in concert with what we're working on at the state and local level, and hopefully lead the way instead of lagging behind. So we can speed this up. We just have to be committed to it. We have to pursue a range of solutions, collaborate between different social change movements, and work at the different levels of government. So I hope that that was informative in some way, and we can continue to put the pieces of the puzzle here, going beyond, the obvious or what might be the popular conversation. So include thinking about our militarism, and most importantly, our overall priorities in the future we want to see. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. Thanks very much for that enlightening presentation. And so next up we have Mark Lichty. Mark is someone I've known for many years. He's a lawyer, retired businessman, and the president of the Resolution Media Fund, which was notable for a great film about fracking called Groundswell Rising and resistance to fracking. I first met Mark when we served together at the Project for Nuclear Awareness, a group in favor of nuclear abolition, just as the Peace Coalition is. And finally, he was a plaintiff in the League of Women Voters case against the Pennsylvania Republican Party, which had redistricted Pennsylvania House seats. That is the Supreme Court case redistricted for Pennsylvania House seats, which had been gerrymandered just out of, in a totally arbitrary way. And of course, we were victorious in that lawsuit. So Mark is a man of many talents, and please go ahead. You're muted, Mark. You're muted.
I'm unmuted now. Thanks. Thank you for mentioning that gerrymandering case, because at the base of all of this, these problems is the gerrymandering issue, and that needs to be on our radar screen at all times. So I tend to be pretty serious and concerned about this, and I'm guessing all of those in the audience are fairly serious and concerned about what's going on in the climate and with this Gibbstown terminal. So let me take a poke at some humor. What do you get when a climate change activist creates computer code? You get an Al Gore rhythm. That would be Al Gore rhythm. And now one of the problems with Zoom is I have no idea what the reaction was to that joke. I'm guessing it was probably a fair amount of moaning, but in any event, I think, you know, in dealing with these things, we need to find ways to bring humor to it. Otherwise, it's awfully weighty on us. And Ed, I wanted to thank you too. You already picked up on the use of the term climate emergency, and that whole evolution of how we talk about what we talk about here has been fascinating. Back in the 90s, it was called global warming. The Republicans didn't like that, so they changed it to climate change. And then I've been using climate crisis for quite a while, but a few years back, I started to use the term climate emergency. And for my own sense is that climate emergency is what we should all adopt, because it's a call to action. It is indeed an emergency. And so I encourage all of you that are listening today to think about using that term. So I wanted to thank Ed, the Peace Coalition, for inviting me to this. And your leadership in so many areas of social justice is commendable. And it's been a lifetime work for you, and I really respect that. And I don't have any idea what you're going to do when you fix all these problems. You'll be out of a job, but I'm guessing that there'll be other.
Only wish.
Yeah, I know. And to Tracy, thank you for that presentation. It's an honor to be with you. Tracy was in our film Groundswell Rising, and in fact, I guess I could put a link to that film. It's on Amazon, but you'd have to pay for it on Amazon. Maybe I'll put a link to the film in the chat box if I get a chance. Renard Cohen and I, when we did that film, Renard was the conceiver of it, was the director. We traveled all over the United States shooting and interviewing people about fracking. I would say this about the fracking issue. There's lots of organizations that were involved in stopping fracking on the Delaware River Basin. But I think that if the river keepers weren't leading the way, I'm not sure it would have been stopped. I kind of think it wouldn't have been. And so we're grateful to the Delaware River Keepers for your efforts in stopping that. And two, the Delaware River Keepers led the charge on the Supreme Court case, Robinson Township, which set aside a fracking act in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure I have time to talk about that now. So I think if we have time, maybe I'll talk about it later on. But I also want to thank the audience, because without your voice, we're not going to change anything. And so you're taking time out of your Sunday to be here. One of the difficulties we all have is there's so many things that are being thrown at us. It's really hard to stay focused. And so I encourage you all to stay focused. I want to give you a little bit of my own history too. So I started out pro-fracking. I had a manufacturing plant. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars changing from one fossil fuel to the other back around 2006 or so. I bought into all the gas companies' propaganda. You know, it was the chemicals were as safe as the chemicals under your sink and all of those things. And so Then when I started getting involved with the film, I flipped. And I think 30 years from now, we're going to look back and say, what were we thinking? What were we thinking when we were doing all of this fracking? And I had the opportunity to go to show the film at the Paris Climate Accord. That was probably one of the high points of my life, really. And I guess I want to make the point here too, is that now is the time that this terminal has to be stopped. These things gain a momentum, and the more momentum they get, the harder they are to stop. And one of the things too, Tracy touched on this, but the hypocrisy of the fracking companies is overwhelming. They said to us originally that we needed this gas for our national security. Now they're exporting our national security. And so pretty much anything that comes out of their mouth, you have to be suspicious of. So what does the Pennsylvania Environmental Rights Amendment have to do with New Jersey LNG terminal? Can you put the slide up, please? Oh, you got it up. Thank you. Keep it up there. Keep that. Actually, no. Put the amendment up. So, gosh, that's small. Oh, you know what? I'm going to expand this. Well, I think I can read that. The people. I want to read the amendment to you. The people have the right to this is, by the way, Pennsylvania is only one of 2 states that has this in the Constitution. And so the people have the right to clean air, pure water, and to the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. That language, by the way, is very broad. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of the people, including generations yet to come. As trustees of these resources, the Commonwealth shall preserve and maintain them for the benefit of the people. That word trustee too is critical. All public officials in Pennsylvania have a trusteeship duty. That's a weighty duty. And actually, Tracy, I was going to suggest to you and Maya at some time to put together a business card that would people could take to their legislators and give them to the legislators and say to them, for example, how's the LNG terminal complying with this? And I'll get to this, why we're talking about this amendment in relation to a New Jersey plant, and that's an important link that I want you to understand better. What we want to do here is we want to cut the monster's head off. We don't want to we don't want to have any LNG pulled out of the ground. And a lot of states have done it. Countries have done it. New York and Maryland surrounding Pennsylvania have done it. So if we can cut that head off, then we don't even have to talk about these LNG trains in this terminal. That's easier said than done, by the way. But what's happened in Pennsylvania is the wallet has replaced the legislator's heart. And this whole absurdity of this, it goes even deeper. Not only has the wallet replaced the heart, but the state of Pennsylvania is subsidizing the fracking companies to the point of $3.8 billion per year. That's a subsidy per taxpayer of $276. Let that sink in. And this is a corporate welfare state beyond comprehension. And if you're interested in learning more about that, Penn Future did a really good report on that. And they're going to be talking on that at a webinar at 11 a.m. tomorrow. So if you went to the website, you could hook a link into that. So my thing is that if we can better deploy the Environmental Rights Amendment, it may be possible that we can at least initiate a moratorium on fracking in Pennsylvania. Again, I want to remind you to, when you're talking, I don't care whether you're talking to your township supervisors or your county commissioners or your legislators, all the public officials, remind them of their trusteeship duty. By the way, I should back up a little bit. Nikki, if you could put the other slide up. So I mentioned, I did in addition to Groundswell Rising, I did a short film called Pennsylvania, A Fractured State. And what happened was that I interviewed about 30 people, and only 2 people even knew we had an environmental rights amendment in Pennsylvania. So I was compelled to do this film, and I, I had the opportunity to interview Frank Curry. What a sweetheart. He's just such a sweet man. And by the way, Frank's coming out with another book, and it's the 50th anniversary of that amendment. So my purpose in the film was to get people aware of it, of the amendment, because if they're not aware of the amendment, they're not going to deploy the amendment. And that amendment has been deployed recently in 2013 with the Supreme Court Robinson Township decision and the Environmental Defense Foundation decision. I think that's beyond our time limit here, though. So the point that I would want to make with folks is that this fracking terminal doesn't only violate it violates the compact, actually, the Delaware River Basin Compact. It also would violate the Pennsylvania Constitution. And there's over 1,800 studies that establish that fracking has environmental and health effects. And that number of studies is way beyond a preponderance of the evidence, which would be civil legal standard. But so there's overwhelming evidence that fracking is not safe. And, I was thinking too, when I was just writing this morning, about comparing fracking with Love Canal. Fracking, well, some of you might not even know about Love Canal, but Love Canal was brought about in, I think, the early 70s, and they discovered all kinds of toxic drums buried there. And there was some cancer exposure, but nothing to the level of the exposure that we see from fracking. And yet we see very little action on fracking, yet that Love Canal matter was resolved in a matter of a few years. I wanted oh, by the way, I see Nikki has posted, so that if you want to get a link to the film, it's listed there. And also Maya and I had an interview, kind of a mutual interview, that's probably worth looking at. And if, I guess if you want me to send you a link to the film, you can, my email is listed there. And let's see, do we have I also wanted to make a plug for the Delaware River Keepers and the work that Maya is doing. And she has a separate website called forthegenerations.org.
We'll be putting that up, Mark.
Well, we got it right there. It's there.
Yeah,
right
there you
now.
go.
And so Ed mentioned the February 25th meeting. That strikes me as a fairly important meeting. It seems like, it's a meeting to consider a ban on the Delaware River Basin Commission, but we're always suspicious, and it's certainly worth being involved with that. And I want to make a request to all of you on this call too. I did this film, this 14-minute film, over a year ago, pre-COVID, and but then I put it on the shelf when COVID came around. So now I'm trying to roll it out. And so I'm starting with Unitarian churches. But if you know of, I'm happy to do this kind of thing with the film. If anybody knows of any vehicles to do that, it's a way to elevate the consciousness of the Environmental Rights Amendment. I yield my remaining time to Ed.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark. That was very elucidating. And so the next thing we're going to do in a minute is take some questions. But I see one question about can we replace, some politicians are in favor of these this terminal and exports because they believe it will provide jobs. And the question is, can we replace this with green energy jobs? So Nikki, if you could put up the slide on green energy jobs, I believe that you should have that.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Ed, while Nikki is looking that up, just like to say, there's no jobs in Pennsylvania related to the Gibbstown terminal. And as far as the transportation is concerned, there would of course be truck drivers or trains, but those jobs are, separate. The only jobs that would come would be temporary construction jobs in Pennsylvania at the Wyalusing plant in Bradford County. There is union support, unfortunately, in New Jersey for the terminal itself. Again, it's when you look at the numbers, it's a few hundred construction jobs that are temporary. And then after that, no more than about 50 permanent employees, and we're not even sure they're union.
Right. It's really very few jobs. And if we go to the next slide, Nikki, there it is. So there's a huge number of jobs, to answer Marilyn Quinn's question, that will be provided and will be, will provide for innovation, will provide for new jobs, will provide for reviving economies in various parts of the country. In Pennsylvania alone, if you look at the this figure, 122,700, that figure is simply the number of, if you go back, there you go. That figure is just solar energy jobs. You see it's in the yellow code in Pennsylvania, okay, that are projected. Whereas, as Tracy was mentioning, jobs from something like Gibbstown are in the hundreds, not even the thousands, let alone 100,000. Nationwide, this is a study that was done at the Renewables Project at Stanford University. That is a conservative estimate, 7.9 million new jobs that will be provided by some of the following renewable energy: offshore wind, onshore wind, hydroelectric, tidal, geothermal, and reforestation. And reforestation is one thing that is not often talked about, but it's something that can be done all over the United States. The United States was once probably the most forested area in the world, but it's been decimated, especially in the Northwest in recent years. So I hope that answers Marilyn's question. We have a number of other questions for the panel. Enid asks, and I guess any one of the three of you can comment on this. Is it true that President Biden is not against fracking? And by the way, before you answer that, let me mention that we are being joined by Karen Ferridan of Berks Gas Truth, a founder of Berks Gas Truth 10 years ago and a leader in the Better Path Coalition against fracking in Pennsylvania. We're being joined by her and by Reverend Bob Moore, our executive director. So any one of you can jump in on these questions, but let's start with Karen. Is it true that President Biden is not against fracking?
That's right. He's not against fracking. And in fact, the first two things he did pretty much put him in Obama territory. You know, he rejoined Paris and he canceled Keystone XL. But at the same time, he's followed Obama's plan and, you know, his approach to it all by playing both ends against the middle. And so I actually pulled up a quote testimony as she was going through her confirmation process to be the Secretary of the Department of Energy. And she says, I believe U.S. LNG exports can have an important role to play in reducing international consumption of fuels that have greater contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the reason why that's significant, other than the fact that she's supporting the thing we're talking about today, is that it harkens back to the bridge fuel argument that was so prevalent during the Obama administration, and which has been debunked a million times, that natural gas is not a bridge fuel. It's been called a bridge to nowhere. It's been called all sorts of other things. It's a gangplank, not a bridge. But you know, all in all, people like Dr. Bob Howarth from Cornell University have done a really excellent job of taking apart and debunking that myth. And so here we are, after the Trump administration and all those attempts to roll back every imaginable environmental protection. That's good. All the activism that has been going on for the last 4 years is to stop things from getting worse. But now we have this moment to try to make things better. And now we're up against a very familiar kind of character in Joe Biden. And so now we have to, you know, reorganize, we have to regroup and recharge after the period of time we've just been through to really push him to do a whole lot better than he's planning to do. So he talks a good game, so did Obama. Don't believe it.
The only thing, thank you for that. The only thing I would add to that is that Biden has promised no new fracking on federal lands, okay? But we all know that the majority of the fracking is on private lands. So it is kind of a have it both ways situation, but we need to get him to, you know, be much stricter on that. Another question that we have is, Tracy, you mentioned the special permit from the Trump administration that allowed these rail cars that have never been used before for LNG to be used for this dangerous, inflammable LNG. The question is, can that be revoked and how would that work?
So that special permit was issued to the subsidiary for New Fortress Energy, and it expires in November of this year, 2021. They can get an extension, of course, and they would probably apply for an extension. But the permit was given by the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, which is under the Department of Transportation. So right now it is legal for them to use that. Now, we have filed right to know requests and have been denied the information because it's considered to be proprietary about whether or not they've actually ordered these cars. Because there's not enough of them to use if they were to truly start transporting. And however, the Wyalusing plant was mothballed in the spring of last year. They said it was because of COVID and they're coming back to begin construction. But because of all this timing difficulty and the fact that our communities working together actually delayed the project, it means that they might not be able to even have the product to operate by November of 2021. And whether or not they would be able to, you know, transport depends, of course, on having LNG to move. Also would like to point out that Delaware Riverkeeper Network is fighting all the major permits for this project. And one of those permits under the Army Corps of Engineers has a prohibition of work in the water. And even though the Delaware River Basin Commission gave their approval for the project in December, because they did not begin construction before they would have to close it down on March 15th, according to the Army Corps, They now cannot start construction until September of next year. And that's for the protection of the Atlantic sturgeon. Short-nosed sturgeon, Atlantic sturgeon are vulnerable, endangered, federally endangered species who use this part of the river. And so the problem with the permits expiring for the transport under the special permit are similar to the problems that New Fortress Energy now is facing because of the delays of the project.
Thank you for that. Another question is, tell us a little bit more about the way it works for the Delaware River Basin Commission. Most people are not that familiar with it. How does the approval process for this LNG terminal work with that? What's the status in the Delaware River Basin Commission? And can you tell us about the court case that the Delaware River Keeper has launched in district court, federal district court?
So in June of 2019, we were all shocked when a hearing was called by the Delaware River Basin Commission for this project. The Delaware River Basin Commission is made up of the governors of the 4 states and the Army Corps of Engineers. So New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, that all have portions that flow to the river, are represented by the governors, who then have their alternates attend the meetings, but the governors are calling the shots. And the Army Corps of Engineers, who represents the federal government, used to be, of course, representing President Trump and is now representing President Biden. So the approval that was given back in 2019, very quickly after the hearing, and people came out quickly to oppose it, was then contested by Delaware Riverkeeper Network. It went through a whole year of back and forth with the litigation until finally in May of 2020, a public hearing. COVID had already occurred, the pandemic was already in place and the shutdown, so it was held virtually. But in May, there was a virtual hearing, and it went on for 8 days with experts from our side about how this would destroy Atlantic sturgeon and short-nosed sturgeon habitat, would actually kill one of the most endangered species in the U.S. Because the Atlantic sturgeon is down to only a few hundred, under 300 individuals, and they're a unique ecotype to the Delaware River. So that dredging that would occur and all of the other environmental problems that would occur were quickly sort of set aside after this hearing. It was all thoroughly examined, but set aside by the hearing officer, who had decided, after he heard everything, to go ahead and say the DRBC should allow the project to move ahead. So that decision was then, that recommendation by the hearing officer, given in August of last year, was voted on, was brought before the Delaware River Basin Commission, these 4 governors, representatives, and the Army Corps of Engineers, and they voted to delay making a decision because they had only gotten this voluminous record of 10 days before, and they hadn't had a chance to go through it. So it's perfectly reasonable. And they're actually a very, slow, kind of, deliberate agency.
That was August of last year.
That was September when the meeting occurred. The recommendation was in August. So our community fought and screamed and yelled through expressions of opposition to this project, from Wyalusing to across Pennsylvania to Philadelphia, New Jersey, Empower New Jersey, Protect Northern PA, the local community who's going to be affected around the terminal. People mobilized, and those expressions were brought to the Delaware River Basin Commission with tens of thousands of petitions in September, and they delayed it. Well, that delay ended up being very important, but what happened is it went to the next meeting in December. They approved it. The delay was important because it did not allow Delaware River Partners to begin construction before the prohibition on work on the water kicks in on March 15th. So it was very important. But what happened in December is all of that expression of opposition had actually grown even greater by the time the December meeting came, and they still did not listen and went ahead and approved the project. So as a result of that, Delaware Riverkeeper Network has appealed that. We filed in federal court against the Delaware River Basin Commission. We believe it's an absolute violation of their compact, and because it will be destructive of the water resources of the watershed, which is.
So
what
can
they're
I
supposed to be doing.
stop you for 1 second? So because we believe, and I agree with you, that this is in violation of the Delaware River Basin Commission compact, you appealed it to federal district court?
Yes.
And what is the status in the federal case?
It's been filed, and now the next answer will come from Delaware River Basin Commission.
Okay.
So there will be legal papers filed. We've asked for a hearing.
So this will take a while, it sounds like.
Oh, yes,
Most
yes.
federal cases take a while, which is to our advantage, because in the meantime, we all need to file more letters and petitions. I want to just remind everyone that on the chat, we have the sign-on letter. If your organization wants to sign on, I believe we have over 100 organizations now that have signed on to that letter to President Biden. Is that right? And we can also, of course, sign on as individuals to a petition from Delaware River Keepers. We have that on the chat, I believe. Okay, so let me turn to another question. This one is for Nikki. Can you tell us more about the objections, or also others if you want to jump in as well? But Nikki, can you tell us about the movements in Ireland and Puerto Rico that were mentioned to oppose the import terminals and to support renewable energy?
I'm not equipped to answer that. I think Tracy would be the one you want to ask.
Okay, let's go back to Tracy.
Sure. So in Ireland, the community around Shannon, which is where New Fortress Energy was proposing to build an import terminal, organized themselves and opposed the terminal through actions at the grassroots level and through legal matters. And they also worked in order to get a new government elected. And in Ireland, a coalition government was put in place for the first time, and I don't know, maybe it is the first time. And that coalition government includes the Green Party. And as a result of the efforts that have come about due to the changes in policy regarding energy consumption and development in Ireland, the movement has actually gotten to the level of now being on the cusp of being approved by the European Union to actually ban any liquefied natural gas imports. So New Fortress Energy's import terminal, there's another one which is for the Cork County area in the southern part of Ireland, that they would all be outlawed. And the reason that is given for this change in policy in Ireland is because of the climate catastrophe that everybody is sitting on the cusp of. So and then locally, the Shannon folks are fighting because there's an endangered dolphin similar to our endangered species here that are threatened by the actual construction and dredging. In Puerto Rico, we all remember the horrific results of the hurricane that destroyed completely their energy infrastructure for so long. And as a result of that, a real movement grew up from the grassroots that why should we be importing our energy from another place? And why should we be polluting our air and having actually less stable sources of energy like fossil fuels? And instead, let's put in place less centrally located, more distributed renewable energy using the sun and wind. We're an island. And that has been growing. And as a result of that, a terminal that was already approved snuck in, actually, like New Fortress Energy does. By the way, they're run by a hedge fund. They're not really an energy company. They've taken on energy as a way to make a lot of money. I hope they never make a penny off it. But what they did do was build a terminal during this whole period of rebuilding the energy infrastructure in Puerto Rico for importing this gas from Gibbstown. And that actually, right now, they're getting small amounts of it from Florida, where they have a small facility there, and they're operating. So that terminal is actually operating, but it looks like under the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, they're going to require that New Fortress Energy go through the concerted process that that FERC requires, and they may end up being shut down. But also, New Fortress wants to build another facility in Puerto Rico that is not going to be able to start, probably not because of the local folks fighting it, but also because of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is going to make them go through at least a 2-year process in order to be able to build a new terminal there, which they avoided doing, and they've tried to avoid doing at Gibbstown as well. So they're skirting the regulations and trying to dodge the public scrutiny of this project, basically lying to agencies. All of that is coming back to roost now, because they're going to get held up by the process itself in Puerto Rico as well as in Ireland. There are other, unfortunately, places that they are developing, such as Jamaica, Angola, Mexico. So the fight is not over, certainly in terms of where they want to send or where they want to force LNG on foreign nations, and also, Puerto Rico.
Yes, thank you for that. That's very comprehensive. I would only add, in terms of Puerto Rico, there is a local Philadelphia group, a community group called Philly Boricua. And I touched base with them just this week, and they are interested in working together, and I believe that Tracy already know about them.
Philly Boricua is leading our Philadelphia effort.
Great, that's great.
They have been involved and leading it from the very beginning. As I mentioned, the train tracks go right through the Puerto Rican community there.
Exactly.
So Philly Boricua is the leader. 350.org Philly is also a leader there. And then there's other climate groups that are working. So right. The Philadelphia, Philly Boricua community is very much involved.
Yeah, and people are really, as I understand it, up in arms about this in that community, and rightly so. As far as Puerto Rico itself, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, I would recommend a video by Naomi Klein, who is probably well known to most of us. She was interviewed on Democracy Now! Because she had visited and spent some time in Puerto Rico, and she has highlighted a group called Queremos Sol, we want the sun. In other words, we want sun, not liquefied natural gas or any of this other stuff. So that's another good source of information. I want to get to some of our other questions. We have about 10 minutes. So someone asks, let me see, I'm not sure who asked this question, but what is the role of the the Federal Department of Transportation? As we all know, Pete Buttigieg was just approved as the Secretary of the Department of Transportation. What is their role in permitting or opposing LNG transportation? I'm not sure who wants to answer this question if we know. What is the role of the Department of Transportation?
Well, I don't want to dominate answering the questions, and maybe someone else wants to chime in, but the Department of Energy is the parent or the administration's arm that PHMSA is under. So the Pipeline Hazardous Material and Safety Administration is the one that issued the special permit and also the federal rulemaking. So it could be stopped. It could be stopped when the permit comes up for renewal, and the Biden administration can do that. Okay. As far as the rulemaking is concerned, there are executive order powers that Biden has. How that will actually go, I don't know. 14 states and the District of Columbia are suing to stop that rulemaking, and Delaware Riverkeeper Network and 5 other organizations are also suing and have been joined into that lawsuit. So we hope to be able to stop that legally, and maybe through that litigation, the Biden administration will step out by not defending it.
Right.
Possible.
I just wanted to add quickly about PHMSA because they have oversight of pipelines when there are accidents and things like that. And so in the larger issue of fracking as it relates to all of this, what we've experienced many times is that PHMSA has been cut so dramatically that they don't have the, the people power to really provide the oversight. And so one of the interesting things I'm going to be looking for out of this new administration is if they're going to put some muscle back into their agencies overall, but PHMSA being one of them, because we've been left without any recourse when things happen.
Right. Thank you for that. We have a question from Kip Cherry, who is on our CFPA board. And Kip writes, maybe I missed it. What is the next approval deadline? I assume you mean by the Basin Commission. Are there any local approvals required? And a related question from someone else was about Philadelphia City Council. Do they have a role? Who would like to take this question?
Well, I can just first say we do have a draft resolution, and part of the work that we're doing with Philly Borrecos and 350 Philly is perhaps to move that resolution. We tried to do it before the DRPC vote. We're not able to. City Council does not legally have power over the project, however, or the transportation. It's a federal issue, but still there are steps that can be taken, and the target would be Governor Wolf on that. And then as far as the, what was the other part of the question, Ed? Oh, the next steps. Yeah, so there are some key permits that are missing. Now we are appealing the major permit that was given by the Army Corps of Engineers, and hopefully we're going to force the NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act process. If we do, it will at least add 2 years before they can move ahead. But the important thing is it would look at siting issues. It would look at the issues of whether or not this is a safe operation that they're proposing there. Nobody has looked at the dangers of LNG being handled at this site or being transported into the site. So we're hoping that either FERC or the Army Corps will institute that process through as a result of our litigation. The other piece of it is that we're appealing the New Jersey DEP's approval, and they still need an air permit from New Jersey DEP. It's a major Title V air permit because there's a lot of pollution associated with the emissions at this site. So we are very engaged watching that very carefully, and we'll of course fight that. And then there's also an approval that's needed by the Toxic Catastrophe Prevention Act in New Jersey. We're hoping that they actually apply all the provisions of that act in order to be able to come up with the conclusion that we know is true and the community know is true, which is that you cannot safely operate that terminal at that site. It's far too close to where people live. It's far too connected to the river. So in terms of people, in terms of the environment, it's a no-go if they truly apply the TCPA in New Jersey. So those are other areas and there's other things too we're working on. We're always looking for other creative things that we can do. Sometimes they're roadblocks or delays, but other things are substantive. So let's keep, resolutions. We have a new resolution campaign that'll be launching in South Jersey. One in Philadelphia will be launching. So let's keep thinking.
Yes, thank you for that. And the last question we're going to have time to take is a simple one. What is Governor Murphy's position on the facility? Who wants to take this one? Probably Tracy.
It's complicated. I'll tell you, he voted with everybody else for the approval of the Gibbstown LNG export terminal, what they call Dock 2 in December. Now, New York abstained, and they actually put a motion out to try to get the others to delay it further, but nobody seconded it. But he did vote for it. However, the day before the vote of the DRBC, Governor Murphy made a statement to the press that he does not support liquefied natural gas being exported from that dock. And then he went and voted, and the next day, the news articles came out, and his policy position that was stated by his representative was that he's going to do everything in his power to stop liquefied natural gas from being exported from the Gibbstown Logistics Center. So this is very interesting situation here, and we have certainly called him on it. in our coalition, Empower New Jersey, which is very engaged on this and has been for 2 years, is, putting the feet to the fire. We want him to walk the talk. And that would mean actually, he said, oh, I had to support the dock because it's construction jobs, it's progress. We don't agree with that, of course,
Sure.
but he says he actually is going to try to stop liquefied natural gas from being handled and exported there. We'll see. Everybody in New Jersey is certainly pressing for that to happen.
And finally, on February 25th, we want everyone to be there because there is going to be a vote on a fracking ban in the watershed, correct? But they will not be I just want to be clear with everyone in our audience, they will not be voting on Gibbstown as such there, right? It's a whole separate issue. Is that correct?
It is a separate issue. You never know what they might pop up with and say, because it's a very opaque, you might say, agency. There's not a lot of transparency there. We don't even know exactly what they're going to be voting on next Thursday, but we know it has to do with the ban, and we know it has to do with fracking. We're hoping it's a ban on all fracking and the activities of wastewater discharge and water exports. And whether they throw something else in, I don't know. But in terms of Gibbstown, they took their vote.
But we should be there to at least support the part of the resolution that talks about banning fracking in the Delaware watershed.
Absolutely, we need support.
So thanks to all of our speakers. We also have Reverend Bob Moore is going to do a very quick wrap up. But I want to add one thing. I see a note here from Renard Cohen, who is one of Mark Lichty's board members, who supports the Delaware River Keeper through a wonderful art project. So let me just read quickly what we have from Renard. Please check out our website, artforearth.com, which turns art into support for our partnering groups like Delaware River Keepers, Green Amendments, and Food and Water Watch. We need permanent green amendments in all states and at the federal level. Right now, as Mark mentioned, only Pennsylvania and Montana have such laws. So that's what Mark and Renard, and full disclosure, I'm also on that board, and the board for Resolution Media Fund. That's what we have been working on, and you can check out the website at artforearth.com. I think we have some closing comments. I want to thank the panel, and if everyone would join me in a round of virtual applause.
Ed, could I just ask a quick question? When will this be posted? When will the recording be posted on the website? Or that's for Nikki, I guess.
I'll probably get it up tomorrow.
Tomorrow, you think? Okay,
Tomorrow.
thank you.
Okay, great. So we had some closing comments coming from Bob Moore. Are you there, Bob?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yes, well, thank you. And I thank everybody for being on this event. And I just want to underline something that Nikki was saying earlier in closing, which is that I think we need to really get out of our silos and see the intersectionality and the interconnections between these various issues, and especially between the climate emergency and the nuclear weapons danger. Those are both existential crises. And I was just reading an article by Bill McKibben this morning with all the math laid out very clearly in a very succinct way that basically we've got to reduce the greenhouse gases by something like 50%, half by half in the next 9 years. So time is running out. These are urgent matters that have to do with the well-being and even the survival of the human race. And we can only deal with them by being in this together, getting out of our silos, being willing to do intersectional work, and work in alliance with each other. So that's what our No Wars, No Warming campaign is about. You can see the link there if you want to find out more about it. I hope you'll join with us. We're trying to revitalize this campaign with all of the many urgent matters happening right now, but the many new opportunities as well under the Biden administration. So I hope you'll stay in touch. Our overall slogan for many years has been think globally, act locally. And that's exactly what this afternoon has been about. The local manifestation of the climate crisis right now, the climate emergency, is the Gibbstown facility. Let's work together to stop it and to stop fracking. Thanks very much.